Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be knitting myself some shorts. As you might have seen in my crochet mesh vest video that I recently posted, last month I got some new yarns at Hobby Lobby. I didn't have a plan for these yarns when I got them, but I liked the colors. Recently on Pinterest I've been seeing some hand knit shorts and I thought these colors would be super cute in a pair of lounge shorts. So that's the plan this week. I'm not following any pattern in particular. I didn't find one that I loved, but I think I'm gonna combine a few different ideas. I'll try to pop up some pictures of some of the inspiration. I'm thinking I'll do stripes. I don't know how thin or thick yet, if I will use all these colors or not, but this is the general idea. So I'm kind of just gonna wing it. I'm gonna take my measurements and then of course knit a gauge and then go from there. So let's start by knitting a gauge swatch. Okay, just based off of previous projects using this size of yarn, I'm thinking anywhere between like a 3 and 4 millimeter needle. I'm gonna start on a 4, actually 4.5. I'm gonna start with a 4.5 millimeter needle, knit up a gauge, or at least start knitting up a gauge and see how I like the drape of it, and then I'll go from there. Okay, I'm trying to decide if on the swatch I should change colors just to give myself an idea of how often I want to change colors, if I want to do the full 3 colors, if I just want to do 2, if I just want to do 1 color. The reason I was thinking I couldn't do 1 color is because I only have 2 balls of each color, so I don't know if that's going to be enough. I would imagine it would be, but I don't know if I'm willing to take that risk because I don't want to get almost done with the project and then realize I don't have enough yarn and have to try and add another color and make it look intentional. So I think for sure I'm gonna do 2 colors, but I need to decide if I wanna do only 2, if I wanna do 3, how many of each color. So I think on the swatch I am gonna switch color and just try and give myself an idea of what it would look like if I use 3 or 2 or yada yada. Does anyone else get this Michaels ad like 5 times in one video? Okay, I've worked this far doing 3 rows of each color. And I want to be able to carry the colors up and not have to cut every time, which with this many rows of each color, I definitely can. It's not too far to carry them. Okay, I repeated each color twice now. I don't want these shorts to be like skin tight like biker shorts, but I do want them to have a little negative ease, so be a little bit form-fitting. And I feel like with these needles, when they're stretched, they're a little too holy. So I might size down for the rest of this swatch and measure the difference and see the difference. I'm also just gonna work the rest of the swatch in 1 color because now I know I like this color scheme. So I went ahead and measured my gauge and I just did a 2" by 2". I know there's the possibility that because I didn't do a 4" gauge, it's less accurate. But because these are gonna be lounge shorts and I'm gonna make them to have a little negative ease, I don't think it's gonna be too big of an issue. Editing me will let us know if that's some foreshadowing, hopefully not. Anyways, in a 2" by 2" square, it would be 14 rows by 10 stitches on a 3.75 millimeter needle. I couldn't find my 4 millimeter, that's why it's 3.75, but I think it's gonna be close enough. And then I think I'm gonna do a 3.25 millimeter needle for the top ribbing. Now the next step would be to measure myself to calculate how many stitches I need to cast on. I'm thinking I want these to be a little bit high-waisted, but not like super. So I'm gonna go a little bit below the smallest part of my waist. I'm gonna say 29.5. So waist is 29.5 inches. The widest part of my hips, 36. And then I'm gonna measure how big each leg is right where it splits off, because that way I'll know how much I need to increase to before I can split the two legs apart. And I should probably look at the construction of knit short patterns because I have no clue. I've never made knit shorts before. And I need to remember that I do have this jumpsuit on under here, so I might need to take off a little. Okay, I'm gonna say 20 inches. I'm gonna say 9 inches. All right, so here you can see the yarn size, the needles that I'm using, as well as my gauge and my measurements. Now I'm going to calculate the garment measurements, and I want this garment to be fitted, so I'm gonna knit it to have at least 1 inch of negative ease, if not 2, because I did measure over top of my outfit that I'm wearing right now. So for the garment, the waist, I think I'll go all the way down to 28 inches. The hips, I'll go to 35. Legs, we'll do 19. Top to crotch, we'll leave the same because we want it long enough. This is what we need to shoot for as far as stitches and everything goes. Okay, so my plan is to cast on 140 stitches. From there, I'm gonna do some ribbing, and that'll just be work straight, and then start increasing at the front and back. I don't know if I'm gonna increase the same on the front and back, or maybe more on the back, because I'm gonna need more fabric on the back than I will the front. So that's something I need to figure out, or think about at least when I'm doing the math, to see how often I need to increase. But I think what I'm gonna do, instead of just increasing to this 175, is I'm just gonna go ahead and increase to the 190, because that would be enough stitches for me to then just break off and split it into the two legs that have 95 stitches each. What was that? So you might have been able to tell in the last clip when I cast this on and started the project that I was not doing ribbing like I said I was going to, because I completely forgot I want to put like a 1 inch or 1.5 inch elastic in the waistband. So I'm just gonna knit in stockinette, and then I'll fold it over and leave a casing where I will insert elastic for the waistband instead of ribbing. That also means that I'm just gonna be using one size needles, the bigger size. I'm not gonna size down for the top because it's staying stockinette. That was only if I was gonna do ribbing. This is my elastic stash. I'm thinking I want a pretty wide piece, so anything like this isn't gonna work. Ooh, this looks promising. 1.25 inches. Okay, now that I've picked an elastic, I know around how long I need to knit in this waistband color before starting the actual color pattern. So this elastic is 1.25 inches. So that means to double this, it would be 2.5, but I'll knit to 3 inches because that will give me 1/4 inch on either side of the casing when I fold it over to get this in. And I think if you give yourself a little more room, it's just a lot easier to feed the elastic in, as opposed to if it was exact the right width, it might be kind of snug. So for now, I'm gonna shoot for 3 inches, and I'm just gonna keep knitting away.
Down from my apex, so I'm going to mark here.
According to my gauge, this should be 3 inches. I did measure a little bit as I went, so I know it has to be close. Oh yeah. Okay, so it's actually more. I think that's gonna be okay. Let's adjust our gauge for that difference. My row gauge is actually 6 stitches per inch. as opposed to 7 stitches per inch. So I think I'm gonna go back to my notebook and adjust my math for the new gauge, and then I'll be able to move on. Okay, so because I only needed 18 inches, I'm actually gonna rip back 3 rows just to make this true to gauge and true to my pattern and design. I could just leave the extra 3 rows of purple and start the next color, but I want to start the color change right after the elastic casing ends. So I'm gonna go back 3 rows and then I will check back in. So we're back to row 18. Now I am able to start the next color. I would like to not have to cut these balls of yarn. I am worried it might get a little tangled, but I'm gonna try it. If it ends up being too much of a hassle, I'll just cut them and weave in the ends, but it would be really nice if I didn't have to weave in an end every time I changed colors, because I am changing colors every 3 rows, so that would be a lot of ends. I did go ahead and redo the math for how many rows I need to knit up until I get to the crotch point, which is where I would split off for each leg. All right, so I went ahead and wrote out what I want to do for the body portion, and I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Basically what I'm going to do is at this point, unless something changes, I'm just gonna keep knitting in the round until I get to the length I need to meet in the middle and start the legs. So let's get to it. I just wanted to show how I am changing colors in order to create a jogless stripe. So when I add a new color, like for example, this purple is the new color, I knit 1 whole round, slip my beginning of round marker, and then when I go to knit the first stitch of the second round of this color, I pick up this stitch below the first stitch that was in the old color, pick up the right leg of that stitch and put it on my needles, and then I knit those 2 stitches together, and that pulls this pink stitch up so there's a less visible jog, or essentially no jog. And you can kind of see on these prior rows, the pink is a little loose. Anyways, you can kind of see on the prior rows that there's no big step where I changed colors. All right, it has been several days for me, a second for you, and the knit shorts are at about the same spot they were when I left. Over the weekend, I went on a couple-day camping trip with my husband, and I got no knitting done, but it was a much-needed vacation. So now I'm ready to get back to work. Here's a look at where I'm at before I keep knitting on this. The thick purple spot is the waistband, and then here is where I've been increasing every other row. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but trust me, there's increases there. So yeah, I think I'm on row 20-ish. Let's keep going, we're about halfway there. Okay, here I'm at 30 rows. So technically with the new row gauge that I mentioned earlier in this video of 6 rows per inch, I would need 15 more rows for a total of 45 after the waistband. But after measuring my gauge, now it's seeming more like 7 rows per inch, which was the original gauge. So we'll see. I'm gonna get to 40 rows or 41 or something, because that is where I would change the way I'm increasing and see how long it is, and then I'll decide how many more rows and how I need to go about doing the increases. So let's get to that point. So that's about 10 more rows I need to knit, and then I will come back with the game plan. All right, so now I'm at 40 rows. I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but at the beginning of starting this, I decided my row gauge was 7 rows per inch. Then after doing the waistband, I switched it to 6 rows per inch. Now I realized it actually was 7 rows per inch. So I should have trusted my original swatch. Anyways, that changes some of my row and increase math, so I'm going to have to make some adjustments. But before I do anything, I'm going to try these on, and I'm thinking that I can just make the depth from the waistband to the crotch a little bit shorter, and they just won't be as high-waisted, and they'll still fit pretty much how I want them to. Okay, I think what I'm going to do is continue on until I get to row 50, and then go from there. I just hit row 50, and I decided I wanted to measure and see what we're working with. This is reading right about 9. I realized that I'm going to need to cast on at least a couple stitches to bridge the gap between the center back and the center front in between the legs. So I think what I'm gonna do, and I just know this from like when you join underarms, this is kind of the same thing as like the raglan increase and then you join under the arm. So I think I'm gonna cast on 4 stitches, and if there's some holes, I'm going to knit 2 together on either side where the holes are to kind of join the live stitches to where I cast it on. So then I believe I'll technically only be adding 2 more stitches to the leg in total, but I'm gonna start by casting on 4, and then I'll do 2 decreases to close the holes. Anyway, I don't know if that's important to you, but I just thought if you wanted to know what I'm doing, I would let you know. I think what I'm going to do is put half of these stitches from the center back to the start of the round on waist yarn on hold, and then the other half I'm going to knit across until I get to the center. Then I'll go ahead and cast on those 4 stitches, and then I think what I'm going to do is actually try these on. Cross our fingers that these are good. All right, so I think this length for the leg is just about how I want it. I will say I'm very, very happy with how these are fitting. I think doing no increases in the front was a good choice because for the most part, I'm pretty flat here. And then most of the increase in width is around my butt, and that's exactly where I kept all the increases. So overall, I'm really happy with the fit. I think this length is gonna be good. I'm gonna do some research on a bind off other than ribbing that will keep the stockinette from rolling. I'm hoping it's going to be pretty minimal, only a couple rows. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the other leg, and then I will come back to fix down the waistband and add the elastic. I will say something I would do differently if I make another pair is I would knit the waistband and just knit straight around without increasing, just to make them higher waisted basically. So that's the one thing I would change, is just making them a little higher waisted. So I would do this waistband part and then knit in the stripes for probably honestly like another inch or 2 and then start the increases. But everything else fits really great. I'm really happy with these shorts. And actually I'm considering writing this into a pattern. So if that's something you guys would be interested in, let me know. For now, I am gonna research some kind of bind off to keep this from rolling, but I don't wanna do ribbing. I just feel like ribbing is not the right cast off for these shorts. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the other leg, and we will meet back up to work on this waistband. All right, so I went ahead and finished the second leg. And I also weaved in all the ends. So the next step is going to be folding over this waistband, and I'm just gonna use, I left myself an extra long tail when I first started this. I'm gonna undo this little bundle I've made, and then just use a whip stitch to catch one leg of the cast on stitch and then a purl bump, and whip stitch this down all the way around, leaving a 2 or 3 inch gap. Then I'm going to try these on to know how big to make the elastic, and from there I'll cut elastic, feed it through, sew the elastic together, and finish sewing down the waistband. So let's go ahead and do that. I really like how clean this is looking on the inside, and it's actually really satisfying to do. So I'm glad I went with this instead of, I was gonna attempt the Judy's Magic cast on, where you have live stitches on either end, and then once it's long enough you knit the 2 sides together. But I thought that would be too finicky, because trying to knit the stitches together while the elastic's in there, pulling it tight, because that's how you would have to do it, would be difficult. And I was worried that doing it this way where I'm sewing it, it wouldn't look as nice, but this is looking really good. All right, so now I have a 2 or 3 inch gap. I'm gonna go ahead and just leave this for now. Try these on, see where they hit so I know how tight the elastic needs to be, and then I'll go ahead and cut the elastic. Here are the shorts on. I'm just gonna take this elastic and scooch the shorts down a little bit. And I'm going to stretch it to comfortably fit, because I want it to fit snug so that they stay up. So I'm thinking about here, I'm gonna add just a hair, because I'm gonna need to overlap the ends and sew it together. So let me just test this again. And this should be good. Okay, I did go ahead and get my sewing machine out, because I'm gonna need to sew the ends of these elastics together real quick after I feed it through. So before that, however, I need to get a safety pin. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and feed this through the channel that I just made. It's actually looking really good. I think having the waistband be almost exactly the width is not only going to help the elastic stay in place, but it just looks really clean, not having a bunch of extra room. So I'm actually really happy with that. Okay, let's take this off. Make sure we got both ends. Before I sew this, I want to make sure it's not twisted anywhere. I'm gonna try not to lose too much length. This sewing machine is new to me, and I've actually never done a zigzag on it. Let's hope this works as it should. Go ahead and stretch this out so that it's fully inside the casing. Ooh, I'm getting excited. I feel like the elastic is gonna be the final touch that pulls it all together. Now I'm gonna finish stitching this waistband down over the elastic, and I'll weave in this end, and then we'll do the full final reveal.